All right, let's do this. Hopefully, you're in a good mood and all that stuff. Hopefully, it's not too far at the end of the day. I always feel bad for block E. It's like, oh, we're almost ready to go home. But hopefully, you're feeling good still. Hopefully, it's not too bad. So today we're going to start reading the medicine bag. We got a little bit in yesterday. Hopefully, you watched that video. We went into a whole bunch of background about the author, about the Lakota Indians. Now we'll get into the story. It's a long one. It takes about 20 minutes to read. You know me, I probably will stop a couple times and talk about what's going on, but I do have the screen right here. So we read a little bit yesterday, but I want to start back over just so we have the whole thing right here. And be on the lookout. Oh, a couple things I gotta say. Remember, we talked about symbolism right before this story, so be on the lookout. Probably some symbolism in here. You know, objects representing more than just the object itself. This is called the medicine bag. You might want to look out for that medicine bag thing. And this is a story I think a lot of people can relate to. That when you're in a situation that you feel uncomfortable in, where you feel like you're different from everybody else. And for the main character, his name's Martin, he's going to feel out of place because his grandfather is not like anybody else's grandfather. And he thinks that's a bad thing. We'll see that he has a sister, younger sister. That might be important. And her friends are fine with the grandfather. He is a little different. If you remember when we read yesterday, I mean, the man is, he's old, first of all, and he's walking down the street. He has a note in his hand. He's looking for an address. So let's get right into the story. And I'm hoping you like this. Like I said, hang on. Like I said, I didn't pick this story. All the eighth graders in Auburn will be reading this story. So they're all reading Red Roses and they're reading this one. So this is a combined one. Didn't pick it. Uh, Not the worst story in the world, though. It's a fine story. If I had to rate this 1 out of 10, solid 7. Solid 7. So let's get into the reading here. Grandpa wasn't tall and stately like TV Indians. His hair wasn't in braids, it hung in stringy gray strands on his neck, and he was old. He was my great grandfather. And he didn't live in a teepee. He lived all by himself in a part log, part tar paper shack on the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota. Paragraph 2. My kid sister, Cheryl, and I always bragged about our Lakota grandpa, Joe Ironshell. Our friends, who had always lived in the city, only knew about Indians from movies and TV. Were impressed by our stories. Maybe we exaggerated. Maybe Grandpa and the reservation sound. I think I messed up there. Maybe we exaggerated and made Grandpa and the reservation sound glamorous. But when we returned home to Iowa after our yearly summer visit to Grandpa, we always had some exciting tale to tell. Paragraph 3. We usually had some authentic Lakota article to show our listeners. One year, Cheryl had new moccasins that Grandpa had made. On another visit, he gave me a small, round, flat rawhide drum decorated with a painting of a warrior riding a horse. He taught me a Lakota chant to sing while I beat the drum with a leather covered stick that had a feather on the end. Man, that really made an impression. We never showed our friends Grandpa's picture. Not that we were ashamed of him, but because we knew that the glamorous tales we told didn't go with the real thing. Our friends would have laughed. So when Grandpa came to visit us, I was so ashamed and embarrassed, I could have died. There were a lot of yippy poodles and other fancy little dogs in our neighborhood, but they usually barked singly at the mailman from the safety of their own yards. Now it sounded as if a whole pack of mutts were barking together in one place. So right there, the those dogs, they could be symbolic of maybe like a new air going through the neighborhood. Usually they stay in their yard, bark like normal dogs. Now they said it sounds like a whole pack of mutts together. Why? I walked to the curb to see what the commotion was. About a block away, I saw a crowd of little kids yelling, with the dogs yipping and growling around someone who was walking down the middle of the street. I watched the group as it slowly came closer and saw in the center of the strange procession was a man wearing a tall black hat. He'd pause now and then to peer at something in his hand and then at the houses on either side of the street. I felt cold and hot at the same time. I recognized the man. Oh no, I whispered. It's Grandpa. And so that feeling, that cold, hot feeling, that is going to come back later on in the story. So be on the lookout for that. I stood on the curb, unable to move, even though I wanted to run and hide. Then I got mad when I saw how the yippy dogs were growling and nipping at the old man's baggy pant legs, and how wearily he poked them away with his cane. Stupid mutts, I said as I ran to rescue Grandpa. So I just want to point out right here what the author might be trying to do here. Okay. The old man's baggy pants. When I read that, I'm thinking this man might have had some kind of weight loss at one time. Like those pants fit at one time, he's lost some weight. And when I think of older people losing weight, I think, oh no, maybe some sickness. And wearily, he can't do it. It's like the opposite of being strong. Well, they don't even give us a definition. Oh, I guess we have to click here. But wearily, another word is tiredly. So definitely not in a strong way. You can imagine old man like these dogs like get back, and they're biting on his legs. Paragraph 9. When I kicked and hollered at the dogs to get away, they put their tails between their legs and scattered. The kids ran to the curb where they watched me and the old man. Grandpa, I said, and reached for his beat up old tin suitcase, tied shut with a rope. But he sat right down in the street and shook my hand. No, sorry. But he set it right down in the street, shook my hand. So if the man sat down in the street, that would be a whole different story. He just sat his old suitcase. I don't know if I'm saying this right, but how Tezuka, grandchild, he greeted me formally in Lakota. A lot of times when authors try to introduce or they do introduce other language, they might put the English equivalent right next to it. So I don't know what Tezuka means in Lakota, but I'm thinking it's probably grandchild. And how? Sounds like hi to me. And then they said he greeted me formally. So um, when I was younger, there was I don't know if you've ever read the story Esperanza Rising. Lots of Spanish intermixed with the English, and it always kind of intimidated me to read. But it right after the Spanish was the English. But and a lot of times authors will put this in what we call italics. Okay, so if it's a different language, they will put it in the italics just so you realize, like, well, maybe I need to pay a little bit more attention to that. All I could do was stand there with the whole neighborhood watching and shake the hand of the leather brown old man. I saw how his gray hair straggled from under his big black hat, which had a drooping feather in its crown. His rumpled black suit hung like a sack over his stooped frame. So, like older people, if they have bad posture, maybe if they have the good posture, stooped, it's kind of bent over a little bit, like older people might do. As he shook my hand, his coat fell open to expose a bright red satin shirt with a beaded bolo tie under the collar. His get-up wasn't out of place on the reservation, but sure was here. I wanted to sink right through the pavement. So obviously he is pretty embarrassed by his grandfather. If I underline this, ooh, that's cool. Um, but that's his grandfather. Older people, set in their ways. I remember my grandmother, she was born in 1909. So she's passed away. I mean, she would be what, 113 years old now, 112 years old now. But she used to always wear, when she was younger, she would wear the things. I don't think she ever bought new clothes. So yeah, she's a grandma though. I think most people are pretty forgiving about that. Like it's your grandfather, But our main character is embarrassed. Hi, I muttered with my head down. I tried to pull my hand away when I felt his bony hand trembling And then I looked up to see the fatigue in his face. I really like that part right there. Fatigue in his face. I don't like the fact that the man is fatigued, but we call that alliteration. And if you can do that in your own writing, you have like two sounds that kind of go together. The two F's there, fatigue in his face, kind of nice for the writing. I like. I try to do that in my writing. And fatigue, you can see it, well, it means physical or mental exhaustion. In other words, tired. But it sounds so much better than I looked up to see the tiredness in his face, fatigue in his face. I felt like crying. I couldn't think of anything to say, so I picked up Grandpa's suitcase, took his arm, and guided him up to the driveway to our house. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but a lot of times when I don't see older people for a long time, sometimes it can surprise me at how much they've aged. Even with my friends from high school, a lot of times when time goes by and I might not see them, like literally for like 10 years. I mean, that's what happens with older people like myself. You might not see your friends or acquaintances for a while. Like, whoa, they're looking kind of old. Am I looking that old to them too? So it can happen. And if you're this man's age, great grandfather, it can be pretty sad. This guy wanted to cry right there, wanted to cry. Sad, sad, sad. Mom was standing on the steps. I don't know how long she had been watching, but her hand was over her mouth as she looked as if she couldn't believe what she saw, then ran to see us. Grandpa, she gasped. How in the world did you get here? She checked her move to embrace Grandpa, and I remembered that such a display of affection is unseemingly to the let me highlight this because there's something very subtle going on here. Like she almost hesitates before she hugs him. Now, our main character, Martin, is telling this story. We can't get inside the mom's head, but we could maybe assume that the reason she's doing this is because he does look so frail. She doesn't want to hurt him. But I remembered that such a display of affection is unseemingly to the Lakota and would have embarrassed him. So the fact that she kind of hesitated a little bit before she went in for the hug, I don't know. Maybe he feels a little bit. We don't know because we only know what Martin's our main character's feeling, but could be a little bit of he could be a little offended, I guess. How, Maria? He said as he shook Mom's hand. She smiled and took his other arm. As we supported him up the steps, the door banged open and Cheryl came bursting out of the house. She was all smiles and was so obviously glad to see Grandpa that I was ashamed of how I felt. So back and forth here throughout much of the short story, there will be this big word. Let's see. Can I write it on the screen? Juxtaposition. I guess the other part is can I spell this correctly? I'm not a great speller, and you would think, hey, English teacher, you should be a great speller. I'm not, but I love spell check. So juxtaposition. This is not anywhere on any quiz you'll have or whatever, but juxtaposition. Authors use this all the time. It's when you put two things that are the opposite side by side so that those two things, the opposites, they come out even more. And what you're going to see here is that our main character, Martin, we've already seen a little bit. He's extremely embarrassed of his great grandfather. He doesn't want his friends to see. And he's probably at that age, like, you are. A lot of times, if you're different in any way, and I'm not sure if you've felt this or not, if you kind of want to fit in with everybody else. And we saw that in Red Roses. It's just like, I don't want to stand out for any reason. If you stand out in middle school, it's often, you're going to be made fun of. It's not like that people like, oh yeah, good job. Hopefully you have friends that encourage you, but a lot of times I see it all the time. Somebody does well on an assignment or whatever, And then their friends tell, well, they don't say, "Hey, I'm so proud of you." I don't think that's something middle school students say, right? Let's be honest. But when you're in elementary school, it's a totally different thing. And then when you're in, high school or an adult, hopefully you'll surround yourself with people who are like, "Yeah, nice job, man. Go for it. Do it." He's a little worried though that if he has somebody different, his friends will make fun of him, which I think in the real world, right? That's going to happen. Like, dude, your grandfather's weird, something like that. Cheryl's a little bit younger. She's oblivious. She doesn't care. So we'll see that throughout. How Cheryl is like all in on the grandfather. Our guy Martin, not so much. Not so much. All right, let's get rid of that. Let's make this a little bigger. And let's get back to the reading here. Grandpa, she yelled, happily. So she's happy. You came to see us. Grandpa smiled, and Mom and I let go of him as he stretched out his arms to my 10-year-old sister, who was still young enough to be hugged. Winchella, little girl. So, I mean, come on. I think that's probably Lakota for little girl, and I probably pronounced that totally wrong. I apologize to anybody who might be Lakota. I can't pronounce that. Winchillala, but I don't want to waste too much time trying to pronounce that. But it probably means little girl. He greeted her and then collapsed. Okay, that's not a good sign. That's not a good sign. You can imagine the old guy, though. We still don't know how he got there. Did he walk the whole way? I don't know. He fainted. Mom and I carried him into her sewing room where we had a spare bed. After we had Grandpa on the bed, Mom stood there patting his shoulder. You made Grandpa comfortable, Martin, she decided, while I called the doctor. I reluctantly, great word there, meaning I did it, but I didn't want to do it. I reluctantly moved to the bed. I knew Grandpa wouldn't want to have Mom undress him, but I didn't want to either. He was so skinny and frail, and his coat slipped off easily. When I loosened his tie and opened his shirt collar, I felt a small leather pouch that hung from I wish they didn't use this word. But when I was reading this before, I'm like, oh, everybody's going to think the wrong thing. I mean, I think the wrong thing when I hear this word. Oh, dear. But uncomfortable moment. Thong, right? It just means a small piece of fabric usually. You might know it in another way, but he had in leather, usually leather, but not always. I mean, not always, but around his neck. I left it alone. I'm gonna unhighlight that. I don't want to. Can I unhighlight it? Maybe I can unhighlight it. Oh no! Now we have to look at it. Embarrassing. I left it alone and moved to remove his boots. The scuffed old cowboy boots were tight, and he moaned as I put pressure on his legs to jerk them off. The fact that the boots are tight, that's a bad sign too. A lot of times when people are older and their blood is not circulating as well, their ankles will swell. Just, gravity, the blood kind of stays down there. I just know that from experience, unfortunately, but yeah, that's not a good sign if people's feet are swelling. However, he did walk a lot, so maybe that's all it is. I put the boots on the floor and saw why they fit so tight. Each one was stuffed with money. All right, maybe this is a good thing. I looked at the bills that lined the boots and started to ask about them, but Grandpa's eyes were closed again. So why don't I highlight this part? Paragraph 25. There you go. Paragraph 25. We will call it a day for now with the reading. There is, if you want, there is the assessment on this. Remember, the 5 questions that we reviewed yesterday, those will be on the assessment, along with some other things about symbolism, because, that's kind of what we're focusing on in this short story. Not the only thing, but hopefully that wasn't too bad for you. Tomorrow, we'll finish up the medicine bag and then move on to something else. It'll almost be the weekend. Tomorrow will be Thursday. Friday, there'll be a vocabulary quiz on the words that we had from Red Roses. We'll do some other stuff next week. Hey, 4-day week next week, 4-day week the week after. So hopefully something to look forward to If you're just sitting there completely bored, like, oh, will it ever end? Yeah,